Our next presentation is with Dan Fine from Darktrace. He's going to be discussing artificial intelligence. Dan, take it away.
Hello and welcome. I'm Dan Fine, Director of Email Security Products at Darktrace, and I oversee the Antigen email product, which is autonomous response for the inbox. And I'll be talking about faking it, how cyber AI detects digital fakes and impersonation attacks. So the way we use email is continuously evolving, right? Email platforms are building out capabilities, new functionalities, and integrations with other tools. And the type of content we share via email changes all the time. Who we communicate with and the devices we are using are all constantly shifting. And as our online habits evolve, so do our ways of working across the digital ecosystem. Our flexibility has been stretched further as many of us have had to adapt overnight to working from home, which has then led to an even greater crossover for many of us between our personal and our professional lives. And this intersection is in constant flux. Humans change and scenarios change, and we need technology that changes with us. Yet, many or almost all traditional email security has not adapted. Legacy email tools were not built to evolve with changing circumstances, and this is a really critical problem. As organizations around the world have shifted to remote working, security teams are struggling with an unprecedented amount of threats originating in the inbox. The email threat landscape is evolving more rapidly than ever, and traditional security controls are proving ill equipped to keep pace. Self learning AI that adapts to the dynamic human behind every email is the only way to defend against every email borne threat. Capable of distinguishing malicious emails from legitimate business communication, AI is proven to stop legitimate attacks, like fearware campaigns, which we'll get into in a minute, from ever reaching the employee's inbox. In the month of April alone, 60% of the advanced phishing emails blocked by Darktrace's Antigen email, which is powered by self-learning cyber AI, were either related to COVID-19 or aimed to trick employees by referencing remote working. And these are what I sort of mentioned before, fearware. And fearware attacks prey specifically on current fears, uncertainty, and doubt, FUD. There's been an onslaught of this style of attack in the past few months, and we know just how effective cyber AI is in defending against today's fearware attacks because we've seen it in action. And attackers are using the shift to remote work to supercharge many types of attacks. For instance, domain spoofing might be used to infiltrate the inbox by impersonating a corporate update related to remote work. Other types of impersonation attacks might attempt business email compromise or leverage AI to launch digital fake campaigns. And the increased use of remote presentation sites has allowed attackers to masquerade behind trusted websites, where malicious payloads can actually be embedded within presentations, which are then shared in emails that go undetected by gateway tools. And when it comes to new forms of fearware, we've seen 130,000 COVID-19 linked domains that were just registered, and too many of which are being used for malicious purposes. And so again, we see spear phishing, CEO fraud, domain spoofing, BECs, fearware. Every type of attack is just being amplified, and the scale that attackers are using these is just higher than ever. So among the increase in impersonations, we've seen that attackers are continuing to pose as whoever they need to in order to get through. And this could be a boss or may come in the form of a SaaS product providing an update. And daily, we're seeing what appears to be SaaS flavor of the day, where attacks are leveraging different SaaS companies and product names to target employees. So here are a few of the blog posts we've written. And over the last 5 weeks, we've seen SaaS products really becoming a major topic of choice for phishing emails. Attackers are playing into uncertainty and doubt as they know companies have only recently scaled up their SaaS deployments. In addition, we also wrote about an impersonation attack we saw. And in this case, it was during a trial where Darktrace was deployed in passive mode, meaning there was no action taken, but an attacker had taken over an internal Microsoft 365 account and sent a fraudulent invoice to the organization's accounts department. The invoice, which contained subtly edited bank details, claimed to be from Siemens, one of the world's leading automation technology companies that we all have heard before. So given that Siemens was an established supplier, right, with a great reputation, the attack succeeded. and the academic institution unwittingly paid over $60,000 into the attacker's bank account. So what we notice with all these impersonation attempts is that they're working. And they're working because they're good, and email security tools are currently just not able to stop them. Really, it's because email security tools are using a legacy approach, and they're asking the wrong questions. This legacy approach essentially works like a patchwork doormat, essentially checking a few lists of various requirements and rules and letting the email in if it seems to check all the boxes. And what's worse, this doorman assumes trust. As long as the email doesn't shout that it's malicious, the legacy tools will assume that it's not. And as we're facing these challenges, traditional email defenses are failing. And they're failing because, again, they're asking the wrong questions. So, of course, we ask, what questions are these legacy tools asking? Simply, the question is this bad? The tools are asking this question regardless of what data they're looking at. It could be a gateway, sandboxing, an internal email scanning or authentication tool. What they do is they take the information they extract from an email and they check whether or not they've seen it before. They run reputation checks by maintaining lists of known bads, or what's been known in the industry as blacklists. They aren't treating the information in context of the larger relationship between the sender, the recipient, and the organization. They look at emails in isolation, treating information as concrete data points, looking for their presence on these lists or not. They don't truly know if an IP, domain, or file is actually bad until they've seen enough of the emails or receive enough reports to begin finding patterns. They typically look at an email at a single point in time. So once the email passes through the gateway, they don't look at it again. And because they look historically and well after the emails are already delivered, they suffer from high miss rates on first encounter. The very first time they see emails with new, fresh infrastructure, they don't have that infrastructure in any lists, so they're letting them through. So, to catch every email-borne threat, we need AI-powered email security solutions. These tools use machine learning algorithms to understand behavior in the inbox and alert when they recognize a change. This is a key shift in that AI-powered tools don't need to rely on blacklists or threat signatures. These tools don't ask whether an email is bad, but instead they ask whether an email belongs. However, not all AI tools are built the same. Most are stuck in the past as they use historical findings to detect new threats. But that assumes, of course, that new threats look like old threats. And they typically still require tuning and configuration, asking that new customers upload loads of information about the company before it can start showing value. So artificial intelligence slapped onto an old approach of looking backwards to predict the future isn't robust enough to offer the comprehensive behavioral analysis necessary to catch the full range of email-borne threats. Antigen email is the only email security tool that analyzes each email in the context of hundreds of learned patterns of life, learned on the job again with cyber AI. This means Antigen email is continuously adapting and evolving as you do to make highly accurate decisions that protect your inbox. This is the immune system approach. If we look at the human immune system, it has a concrete understanding of self. Every immune system knows what its own normal looks like. On any given day at any given time, it knows what normal looks like. And just like that, Antigen email understands normal for every human in mailbox. The technology learns what normal email communications look like and then recognizes subtle deviations from that normal. This is done without a pre-input definition of bad. The technology doesn't look at historical attacks to determine future attacks. Instead, it leverages insights from an organization's inbound, outbound, and lateral mail to deliver security from the inside out. And I love this idea, right? Deep within each of us is our unique DNA, and our immune systems recognize that and protect it. Similarly, the DNA of each and every one of your businesses is unique to you, and it's made up of your people, right? Your interactions, your stories. And even within the same organization, the different group dynamics and individual way of working is just as unique as your DNA. And it's key that the AI is able to learn and discern between them. So when we look at emails, we need to take the unique individual into consideration, but also each connection between two or more people. The tone of conversation will naturally be different according to the history and type of relationship you have with who you correspond with. More to less formal, perhaps sometimes dry and to the point. The technology needs to keep up with the richness of the human experience and not take a one size fits all approach. This means that even when an attacker leverages an existing relationship, for instance by hijacking someone's account and inserting themselves into the conversation, they'll leave traces of anomaly in the exchange because their actions are slightly different than normal. And this is the type of subtle indication that cyber AI can identify and use to stop the attack. So, antigen email doesn't assume trust. Instead, it's looking at thousands of metrics to determine whether activity in the inbox belongs contextually, right here, right now. The technology will ask every conceivable question around who is emailing who and from a normal location. Is the sender new to the organization? And does the email appear to be soliciting information? And we'll run sentiment analysis to determine if the tone is off. Thousands and thousands of questions are asked by the AI. And on screen right now, there are a few of these listed, right? Antigen looks at link rarity. People often share links to the websites they visit and trust. By observing these links in lateral mail, Antigen email can determine which links and domains are rare in the context of the organization. This is also helpful and useful in other threat scenarios, when determining whether a given sender's email domain has been observed in shared internal links. Antigen email actively models relationships between internal and external users and peers, and understands those relationships at a granular level. If an attacker sends multiple emails to a range of recipients in the organization, Antigen email can understand and estimate the likelihood that this particular group would be receiving an email from the same source. And of course, it notices even the most subtle behavioral anomalies. For instance, over time, Antigena learns how different senders construct their emails, analyzing metadata, subject lines, and even the time emails are normally sent and received. This allows Antigena to identify changes that might indicate that the email has been sent by someone other than the true account holder. And these are just a small handful of the patterns that Antigen email looks at. With a deep understanding of the complex story behind each and every email, Antigen email is able to pick up on the extremely subtle shifts that signify a threat. So, what better way than to look at an email example? So, in this email here, we'll see that the email is part of a reply chain that was leveraged on the back of a trusted relationship. Although this email was slightly out of the norm. So it's not common for this sender, Stephanie Perry, to include links within her email to Vanessa, and especially not at this time. Especially links that have never before been seen in Vanessa's organization's inboxes. So by understanding how Stephanie and Vanessa typically communicate, we can identify changes and hold the message back from delivery. So for the more technical folks, here's where it sits. We don't sit in line, so we require no MX record changes, and it installs within 5 minutes. Because all we're doing, and if we take a look, we journal off of the email provider. So regardless of which email security tools you have in place today, will play extremely well with others and act as the last line of defense. So the email is typically sent from an email client, sent to a server, right? Number one, it's then going to be sent to that first hop, wherever the MX record is. So either the email gateway or your email provider directly. It doesn't matter what's going on for number two or between number 1, 2, and 3, because as soon as it goes to that email provider, so after every other tool, the email is then journaled to Antigen email. We process them immediately and leverage API connectivity back to modify the email and neutralize any threats. In every case, the system works by neutralizing threats with a proportionate and tactical response, while sustaining normal email communication. Antigen email might combine any number of approaches to execute the most appropriate response. These actions might include holding back suspicious emails for investigation, or converting attachments into harmless PDFs, or moving email to the junk folder and preemptively removing malicious links and double locking links. Key is Antigen email's decision making. It's operative throughout the entire lifetime of an email, from delivery through to click and execution. As a result of sitting here and not in line, and leveraging API access for when we want to actually change an email and update an email and action an email. You can action that email at any point you'd like, not just when the email is originally processed, but at any point. So if you get new data to support an updated action, you can leverage number 4, that action issued to email provider, that API access, and update that action and issue that action at any point. So another key aspect of Antigen email is that it can be connected to the rest of the Darktrace Cyber AI platform. This means that Antigen email's protection of the inbox and understanding of normal patterns can be further contextualized with information across the rest of the digital ecosystem. So with context from across the entire infrastructure feeding its decision-making process in the inbox, Antigena gets the additional layer of insight to action even higher confidence responses. Antigena emails insights and actions in the inbox can also be connected to detection and response across the entire digital infrastructure, like, say, on the network. If there's a network level event where a device is seen to be acting as though it has just downloaded ransomware, and you see that the file was downloaded from a new link for the organization, and that link first appeared in email, you can say, hey, we have an updated understanding that that link is actually bad, and we should look at all emails that contain that link and take an updated action, right? Neutralizing the threat. And then with cyber AI powered detection and autonomous response, Antigen email guards your inbox 24/7 and matches the full range of email-borne threats, from stealthy social engineering and impersonation attacks to account hijacking and novel malware. Antigen email catches the most targeted attacks, even when the email address itself is legitimate, right? If it's a supply chain attack, because it understands the human behind the address and it understands when the sender isn't the true account holder. It knows that something is off. And these are attacks that can lead to intellectual property and data loss, business and systems damage, damage to digital trust, compliance issues, and of course, serious financial burden. And we know that it's a real threat. We know traditional email security tools aren't working in the face of these threats, as 1 in every 25 branded emails is a phishing attack, and 94% of threats originate in the inbox. And these are huge numbers. And to me, I always like to throw out a thought that, say, if 94% of threats originate in the inbox, and the majority of companies have, defenses that use these traditional approaches, then clearly those approaches aren't working. Otherwise, this number would be so small, it wouldn't even be a stat that we're interested in showing you guys, right? And so with remote working and current fears giving the threat actors new ways to infiltrate the inbox with innovative fearware attacks, we know the numbers are likely only getting worse. And this makes antigen email all the more crucial for protecting your workforce. And spoke a lot about fearware, so I'd love to just quickly dive into an example of the fearware attacks, and these were caught really early on, beginning of March, leveraging new infrastructure. And today, these fearware attacks are being mass manufactured, factory style, right? Launched at machine speed. And we saw this with COVID, where at one point there were upwards of 10,000 coronavirus related domains being created every day, with roughly 9 out of 10 of these either malicious or attempting to generate sales of fake products. And these emails are even starting to be written by AI, trained to go on the offensive and impersonate. The emails they're creating are self-researching and are created at machine speed and scale that humans can't keep up with. The content is so convincing it's nearly impossible for humans to distinguish. And we're seeing these fearware attacks impact all industries. And in this example, we saw impersonation attempts where the apparent sender was the CDC purporting to have emergency information about COVID-19. And these emails all contain links that display text, making it look like the link leads to the CDC, but in reality, the URL is random and polymorphic. And it wasn't on any list of known bad, so it was just skirting through all of the gateway's defenses. The apparent objective was to harvest O365 credentials, and we were able to spot quite a few anomalies that alerted us to the threat, which had bypassed the traditional email security tools.
Antigen email learns normal for every user and mailbox. It creates patterns of life based on what it looks like to be an email within your organization. The Antigen email dashboard serves as a hub for one-click investigation starting points. Along the top are 5 stats that give you immediate insight into the state of your email environment right now. The arrows indicate their upward and downward trends over the last 3 days, which serve as a basis for understanding current risk. This company has seen an increase across the board given some recent announcements that made the news. Security teams deal with a lot of employees who receive a lot of email. This graph in the risk network here lets you see which of those employees is receiving the most unusual mail. This is Angela Darling. She's the most targeted user at this company right now. Angela's the CFO and her company just announced an acquisition, so they were in the press and now everybody's emailing her. Of course, not all of those emails are legitimate. Over on the right, you'll see the most critical emails right now. You'll notice we display emails as you're used to seeing them in your own inbox, and show the most critical tags so you can get a cursory understanding of why they're here. More often than not, you won't end up clicking into the emails Antigen takes action on. There's just no need as the threat's already been neutralized. But in the event you did need to start an investigation, maybe to understand a campaign against the company or just gain a bit more insight, you just start by clicking the email. There's one email in particular that came in today from Ben Smith to Angela that caught my attention. Ben does legal work for the company, so Angela and Ben tend to email all day, every day, especially lately. But for some reason, Antigen email determined this email was 96% unusual. Of course, we see the essentials that were just on the previous page: the sender, the recipient, the subject, the 96% unusual. But a new pause icon on the right indicates the action Antigen took on this email, where it was ultimately held. Email tags translate the AI into plain English so you and I can understand. In this case, we see the AI thought the email was likely an account hijack due to a strong behavioral anomaly, due to a suspicious link sent from a known correspondent. By observing both lateral and external email traffic, we glean important contextual information around what links belong for any organization and the patterns around who shares them. In this case, the recipient was sent a link that hadn't before been seen within the entire organization. This was determined to be behaviorally anomalous for the relationship between the sender Ben and recipient Angela, as they don't usually share unusual links. So now we know why Antigen email made the determination that despite this email being from a trusted sender, it was unusual. Based on this, Antigen email autonomously responded to the action on the email and shared the progression of actions over on the right. By first determining to move to junk with a locked link to neutralize the threat within the link, before having a competing math model determine ultimately this message should never be delivered and was held back. Earlier I mentioned patterns of life for every user. You can actually dive into specific users to dissect their email patterns. Perhaps you want to see if Angela is often the recipient of emails like this, so you can click their email address and you're brought to their profile. Immediately, we can see what Angela Darling's email activity looks like. We know Angela was recently in the press, so her exposure is high right now, and she became a prime target for a flood of new attacks. The number of emails completely held for her were extremely high, and her user exposure score was indicative of why that may be. You can also see Angela's spoof prevalence is high, meaning Angela is not the only intended recipient of fake emails. Other employees within the company are being targeted, and the attackers are trying to mask themselves as Angela. Last bit I want to show is we're able to derive from email activity what Angela's likely personal email address is. This is that extra bit of contextual awareness that allows a security analyst to dive in quickly if there are questions around Angela's email behavior. So in this case, Antigen email was able to identify subtle anomalies and determine that a trusted sender's email was just unusual enough to be indicative of a potential account hijack, and the email and the threats within were stopped. By understanding how any two people in mailboxes typically interact, Antigen email can prevent malicious emails from ever being delivered.
So our customers love it, right? Because they're finding that you can't just, as an attacker, purchase a new domain that has no reputation and skirt by the defense, right? We have a high catch rate on first encounter, meaning targeted email threats are caught by Antigen email. And with that, I'd love to open it up for a Q&A and take any of your questions.